Where does that determination come from? That's the one thing that I've always wanted to ask you. Like,
are we interviewing?
I'm just right now. We're just gonna have the conversation. I'm just gonna get right into it. Like,
yes. Okay,
yes,
let's just do it.
Let's get into it. This is Do You See Us, a podcast highlighting the authentic voices of creatives. I'm S-Quire Johnson. Greetings and salutations, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of Do You See Us? You've just received another VIP pass to another dope conversation with a phenomenal creative artist, complete with automatic line bypass, and the open bar is only limited to what you have in your fridge. How lucky are you right now? Before this podcast became a thing, I've always found myself fascinated with multi-hyphenate people. The ones that can't seem to sit still when it comes to doing great things. This wonderful person you're about to hear from is no different. She is an award-winning social entrepreneur, cultural arts programmer, arts educator, and writer in the dance sector. A Toronto-born dancer of South American heritage with 20 years of experience, specializing in diverse Afro-diasporic dance forms in the West African region, Caribbean folk, and at the time of this recording, is pursuing a PhD in dance studies. Between you and me, I had to make her intro epic, otherwise she'd give me trouble the next time she saw me. It's my pleasure to present to you episode 2 of Do You See Us, featuring Collette, Miss Coco Murray. Where does this determination of Colette's Miss Coco Murray come from?
I think, okay, so the determination comes from going through experiences where I felt limited. People wanting to define me. People wanting me to be seen and not heard. And I would say an inner voice saying, "Excuse me, excuse me, you're telling me what it's going to be, and I have no voice." Yeah. So the determination and the drive and the ambition means you're not going to limit my potentiality. This is the goal. We're going to get to this goal. Everything I say I'm going to do, I actually do it. And if people try to create some type of barrier, or if people try to create conditions that become a barrier, I'm moving around it. It's going to happen.
It's more of a matter of fact thing.
It really is. It really is. It's a family trait. I would say it's a family trait.
What was the first example of that you saw, like as you were growing up, in terms of that family determination?
I would say my mother. My mother is very quiet, but she is a hard-working, caring woman. So always thinking about someone else at the expense sometimes of herself sometimes. And thinking about everybody. Worrying about everybody, doing for everybody. And whatever limits that people try to place upon her, no. I just, even if she didn't even say the words no, her action showed me, no, that's not going to happen. I'm going to have this thing. You're not going to tell me or limit me. I'm going to get this thing. So even if, for example, you work with people, and if you say your goal is to get a house, and people around you are going to say, "Oh, well, no, whatever," because it means that's what you're saying from your lens. If that's the goal, my mother is thinking about her children and her family, and she wants to get it home. She's going to do whatever it takes to get the home. Your opinion doesn't mean anything. So I saw that. A hardworking person. Both my parents, hardworking. To get to the goal, regardless of what people said. So I've always saw that. And I will also say, given that my mother has been in the education system before coming, like since South America, and then I seeing her transition to this education system in Toronto, and how she was trying to go out of her way for any child, any black child, any community, anybody who's disadvantaged. The community work, working with, like, creating programs with young pregnant mothers, going to jail to speak to students or supporting students who actually were incarcerated, working with special needs kids, always seeing that there was something more than the limits that people place upon you. So I saw all of that. So I would say it's a family trait. We go after what we want. We are destined. We want our goals achieved, and you're not going to tell us that we're not going to achieve it. So I would say it's a collective family trait.
What can you remember as your first example inheriting that family trait of determination? Just whether it was like a school thing or something on the outside, defending family, like what would you say it would have been?
I would probably say, I wouldn't even say it was school. I would say when I entered the workforce. So of course, start working at 15 and then working at a job where, it was my father's plastic molding company. I got the night shift, getting great pay, bored, but great pay. And then knowing like, okay, this is not for me, but this is good for the moment. But then when you go and you find other jobs and then you're dealing with people who just don't understand you, want to define you, want to treat you a certain way, I'm like, It's always something within me is like, And it's just listening to that. No, you don't deserve that. No, this is not how it's going to be. This sounds defining. Someone wants to define your reality. Somebody wants to control. Somebody wants to tell you what your pathway is going to be. No. And we have a guy and he's saying, when people's eyes pass you, and they think that they can get away with it. I can always remember there was an incident where it was one of the jobs I had, and I remember taking a leave of absence to finish university education. Whole party, this whole going away, congratulations, whatever. Then out of nowhere, they dismissed me from the job. So, of course, I know that's wrong. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Of course, I done already called lawyer. I done already had conversation.
You called lawyer already. When was this? Like, how old
I
were
was
you
in
at
my
the time?
early 20s.
Okay.
And I sued them. Because that's wrongful dismissal. You're not going to play me. It's because you think you can underestimate me. I don't know what the labor employment laws are. So I remember telling my family and my father, where are you finding courage? Where are you finding courage to go sue your employer? I was like, excuse me, Daddy, this is wrong. You can't do it. And I went through the whole thing. And he's like, I know, but who has the courage?
It's true, because that is a rare thing that you end up finding anybody doing, to try to seek litigation because of wrongful dismissal. Not saying it wasn't the right thing to do, but who do you know?
I think I was like 21, 22. No, just no. You're not going to define the reality. No.
So what ended up happening with that case?
I went to litigation. They had their lawyer and they were saying a lot of, misrepresenting, like things that just did not represent me well. I sat there quite calmly. Oh, they're trying to make it seem like I'm doing this for greed. And when I explained calmly what happened, sequence of events, had all my evidence, mediator's like, but she's got a point. this is wasn't handled correctly. Okay, ruled in my favor. Story done. You're not intimidating me, lawyer. What?
Coco's winning ways.
You let people chat. I know the facts. I'm coming with facts. And you're there with, you had your suit on, I had my suit on. What are you going to tell me? You're going to lie and say what you're going to say because they are going to represent this, well, of course, they were going to ask me to come back. But I was like, that's not a good move. If you went out of your way to treat me like this, why would I go back and work for you? That's not a smart decision. So, no. Again, this whole inner voice saying, no. We're just going to find another job. That's okay. There's other jobs out there. Leave this. This is the goal. This is what's happening. If something's wrong, you handle it and you keep going. You're not going to stop me.
What do you feel, just from your experience from the outside looking in, have been barriers to us actually walking in that truth of determination?
I would say fear. I didn't have a cheerleading squad saying to me, yes, this is what you do, or people telling me this is how you respond. No, I was making the decisions for myself. So I would say, I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, I'm reflecting, I'm going to construct, this is the course of action I'm going to take. There wasn't okay, let's go and get advice. I would say people may have fears. People may not have people to speak to that they trust, that have their best interests. And I'm really trying to stay away from distractions, because at the end of the day, I have to live with the situation. This person's external to it. So I'm going to make sure that I'm going to do something about it. Otherwise, it's just going to bother me. And that's going to be a limitation I put on myself, because it's going to get away. It's going to bother me because it'll be in my mind. I'm going to ruminate over it until it's resolved. So I'm just going to make sure I just resolve it, keep going. So I would say people have to also learn problem solving skills. And when something happens, like, take the emotion out of it, stop emotionally reacting and staying in that space of emotionally reacting. What is the decision you're going to make? What are you going to do? Then execute it, then move.
How would you say that mindset and that direction that you chose to take for yourself had influenced the way that you approach your mentoring capacity with regards to your teaching, and even just from like the dance mentees, for example, that you take on, the youth that you work with on a regular basis? How would you say that experience and that understanding had motivated and shaped the way that you approach being able to actually give back to generations that come after you?
Again, remember, I have my mother as an influence. My family also did community work too. So I had influences. I would say in my pedagogy, in terms of how I do my work, I think I can relate to how someone may feel if they feel like they have limits placed upon them. And then I could probably give them some strategies to take a different course of action and expand their mind to realize there is so much more behind, but beyond the lens that you're looking at. So it's just to get them to see past that, because sometimes you stay stuck in the situation you're in and you just can't see the forest. You can't see the sky. You're just focusing on the trees or the branches in front of you. And it's like, if you only just looked up and looked around and see that there's something beyond this thing in front of you, think about how do you get around it and see the rest of the landscape, as opposed to I only see this one tree in front of me that it's in my way. But no, there's a forest, but if you go around the tree, there's a lane, there is trees, there's a car, like there's something else that's there. But all you're doing is focusing on this one limitation. You're fixated. Okay, so step back. Do you see anything else? Can I help people see anything else? And then give them resources and give them some tools to say, if you want to get past this level, this is what you have to do. This is a strategy you could take. People can choose their path. I can't make them do it. I can offer suggestions. They can see that but at the same time, my ambition takes me many places. So I guess just maybe people seeing that example, okay, if she can do all of these things, I have to tap into what can I do? So hopefully that inspires people as well.
Here's a question for you. When was the last time that you recall feeling fear or anxiety in terms of what you wanted to accomplish, whether it was developing a project or actually taking on a performance or being able to pursue something academically? When was the last time that you recall that significant fear or anxiety before actually pursuing something? Or is that something that is almost like a routine before you actually set your mind to do something?
I would say I had my hesitations about applying to the doctoral program, or the programs I did. Not that I wouldn't get in. That's not what I was worried about. It had to do with, is this the right time? Can I take this on?
Why? Because your schedule was so full, or because you felt that you weren't prepared for it? Because you had already gone through the master's process. Like, what do you feel was that barrier for you?
The barrier for me had to do with, okay, who is in the program? Who would I work with? How are you feeling? Do you have the capacity to do this? We just finished the master's. Are we just going to go right in? Maybe this is the time to do it. Like, all of these things I was mulling over. And I was like, okay, I was getting encouragement, external encouragement. You're going to apply. No, I don't want to hear it. You're going to apply. So the things that I would say to myself, in other ways, this person was saying it to me. You're going to apply. No, you're applying. Worry about that later. And I put together 2 applications, submitted it in, still had the anxiety. I'm like, oh gosh, I got to think about work. I got to think about the projects. I got to think about this. Submitted the thing in, and of course my practice is you apply for things and you walk away and you move on with your life, which means I'm not gonna worry about it. You just wait for the answer. Just move on. There's other things happening. You're doing 20 different things anyway. So yeah, I would say that's when I felt fear. It's like, should I do it? Should I apply? Should I not apply? I did it. And you see the result.
Yeah, it's kind of hard not to see it, given as far as if you even just go to the website and see the plethora of accolades that are behind you now, the amount of awards that you've been able to win, the masters that you have, and again, a doctoral student. Yeah, 3 degrees. Let's go. Let's just make sure to call it out there. From that academic standpoint, what do you feel would be critical for people to know that would want to pursue the arts from that academic standpoint? Because it's a completely different world, I would imagine, from just being a community artist, being able to actually give back to community in that art form. Like, what do you feel would be critical for someone that is looking to take that academic path in order to actually allow for that master's and doctoral achievement to be a reality for them in the arts?
Yeah, you have to have the capacity. It is an endeavor that is like no other. Graduate school is not undergrad. It's definitely not secondary school. And I think because I've been in research intensive programs, because I've never done coursework only. I know those options are out there, but that's not my pathway. If that's the path that people want to go, that's great. I'm looking at making impactful contributions. So develop research skills. So it's the research and the writing skills that people have to feel comfortable with. Not everyone can balance being an artist and also doing that. So we don't see ourselves reflected either doing it as Black people. You see maybe one person here or a couple here, or maybe just this small group and trickling on, but we don't see ourselves reflected there. So it's not like the States. There's a plethora of people degreed up. But here, I would say people are doing, in terms maybe of arts, I would probably say they're doing a lot of other programming. I don't know how many people are doing dance programs outside of maybe George Brown or X University. I don't know, outside of those spaces. Because that's the Toronto landscape. So even though the York program is 50 years old, it wasn't necessarily designed for us. It was designed for the dominant Eurocentric forms, and modern adjacent and ballet. So you have to know that you're coming into a program to talk about your art form, and may not always see yourself represented. So how are you going to navigate that?
So how have you found yourself amplifying that voice in terms of...
I know that I can do it because of how I am with my artistic work, how I am in the community, how I am with advocacy. I know that I can do that, but other people have to come in knowing that that's an extra layer. You're not only taking the program as a student, you're also advocating for yourself to see reflections of yourself, content, guest speakers, practical experience. It may not be there. And then when you're studying and you're reading the materials and going through coursework, yes, you're learning skills, but at the end of the day, for me, I have no problem talking about inclusion and diversity because that's part of my master's research. That's the climate we're in. We've been talking about this for decades. But now I'm in the program talking about it.
This is why we get along. That's just the reality of it. Just to be able to know that the no bullshit thing is just so real within you, that you are extremely focused, you're extremely driven, and there is such purpose behind everything that you do. It's
intentional,
strategic, it's extremely intentional, but it also comes from a place of amplifying our community as well. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I feel like a lot of your peers and a lot of other organizations and stuff like that have been able to recognize, which is the reason why you've been able to build the accolades that you've had. What do you feel is something that the academic world in the arts needs to understand about the importance of community art?
Because even I looked at, that's probably was based on my fear. I'm like, I'm coming in as community, this pigeonhole community category I'm in, into this academic space. Will they accept this?
Yep.
Because you are not on concert stage, theater stage, commercialized stage.
Right.
I hope my presence kind of answers that question. I would like the academic world to know that a lot of art forms were initiated and start from community before it got to any of these other stages that they amplified. So let's look at it that way. So they need to kind of expand their definition of the artist to include those that are actually in the community. They have to think about community practices. It's not just this is just a methodology that we do in research and we just kind of, we go to community to get answers, but then we come back to intellectual high-level spaces and we're just going to theorize about community. No, we're not doing that. You haven't spoken to community. And when someone comes into the community and is going to be in the same academic space as you, they are going to say things. So are you prepared for these perspectives? And can you debate on set perspectives? Because you can have your pedagogy, you can make up your theory. That's great. But what about my contributions and my perspective and what I have to say?
It almost sounds like the academic approach is paralleling those of a political approach in that respect, where you're saying in which that there isn't really that hearing and understanding of where the community perspective is coming from, but decisions are being made that are supposed to be for the benefit of the community.
Oh, yes, because when you're looking at like anthropologists and anthropological research, it was someone that decided to go into communities, for example, to research communities they're not even a part of. Did you ask anybody from the community before you entered? So when you entered, you are coming in with your lens, your ideologies, and your understanding to make assessments and assumptions or create your thinking pathway about this community. And then you write that and you archive it and you document it and you publish it. You never had an interview with the community. You didn't ask community. This has been happening for hundreds of years. So then now it comes full circle where it's like, okay, these are the ethical practices now. You need to actually interview community, and this is how you do it, and think ethically. Like, all of this stuff comes up because community is like, excuse me, we are not happy with this representation that you have put in archive and documented about us. So whether it's archive, whether it's contemporary, whether it's futuristic, you have to speak with community. That's all I have to say about that. You have to.
Let's change gears a little bit. Can you recall the first time that you fell in love with movement? For those of you that can't see right now.
Okay, I would say this is I have to dig back in the archive, and I would say this is Brooklyn inspired or music video inspired, because these are the imagery that you saw. This was the conceptualization of blackness that I saw. Whether it was hip hop, whether it was R&B, whatever the imagery was, dancing black bodies. Okay, it's not like I saw Soul Train like, okay, I want to be a Soul Train dancer. It wasn't like that. Or seeing a music award show, I would say it was okay. And it wasn't even Michael Jackson doing his choreographies. Janet Jackson, Control album, American Music Award performance.
You remember the specific awards show that you caught inspiration?
When she did that, I was like, okay, there's something here. Music's always been around me. I saw that. I was like, you're taking control? And no one's going to tell you anything because you're taking control? And you did all of that on stage? Yes, sister. Okay, I feel you. Prior to all of that, I saw everything. I saw Dance Fever. I saw Soul Train. I saw all these things on American TV, always going to Brooklyn. I saw Beat Street. I saw all these. I saw the emergence of hip hop. Male dominated, so I didn't really feel like, yeah, I can do this movement. That's where it started, but there wasn't that inner connection until I saw Janet. Because I saw men dancing, I'm like, this is great, I could follow and I could do it. And I did. I think I need to see a black woman that could dance her behind off. That's what I needed to see. I was like, okay, yes, I could do all this other stuff. I can mimic what the men are doing on these videos and all these hip hop videos. Great. No, it wasn't the same impact.
So what was the direction for you in that case in terms of dance? Just as far as in your formative years before you came into Miss Coco?
I would just say, the high school scene and just dancing and dance hall, and that was it. And then doing a little bit of African dance, because you had to make up dances for assemblies. We didn't have dance teams or whatever. We created our own choreographies and put it on the stage. So if you want to talk about fear, people talked about you. I didn't care. I did what I had to do because this was part of us creating and putting something on our school stages, right? So, yeah. So all of those genres. So I would say my diasporic stemmed from that space. Okay, there's hip hop, there is dance hall, but then there's African.
Correct me if I'm wrong, during that, because I remember back in those times that anything that was continental African was not something that was in style.
No.
When you're seeing like hip hop and dance hall and stuff like that. So what compelled you to take that direction when it came to your expression within dance?
I think that evolution evolved when, okay, so you do the dance performance with your friends on the stage, and then you form a community group and you perform in community events, like recreational events. But for me, when I took it further, it really had to do with, I need to understand what I'm doing and why. What's the purpose behind this? And I need to find people who can educate me more on it than just someone teaches you choreography and you replicate it. That was surface to me. And I'm like, dance is more than this. I know it's more than this. But I need to connect with the people that could give me that information or that environment that could help foster me in learning more. So I would say that was the driving force. Yeah, dance hall's there. Yeah, hip hop's there. Soca's there too. That's there. But I'm like, no, I need to know more about this because this is tied to my ancestry. Whether I don't care what people feel about the continent. It is part of my history. So that's where it kind of got started. I need to know more about this. I can't be representing something I don't know what it is. People would ask me questions. What am I going to answer and say? You gotta back up what you're doing and have some substance about yourself.
And with that being said, what do you feel about that? I mean, the wave that's been happening over the last few years in terms of the acceptance of predominantly African music, African dance, and so on. Like, and I know that you've seen like over the last few decades
I'm like,
and stuff.
Like, people may like it now, but I was around when nobody wanted to like it. So,
do you feel that it's more like of an identity issue? Like, even taking it away from people that do not identify as ACB, as African, Caribbean, or Black, do you feel that it was more of an identity issue that actually prevented a lot of us from being able to embrace or appreciate it, or?
I wouldn't say it's an identity issue because we all are descendants of various levels of colonization from different countries with different histories. So we have the ideology, the coloniality, is that you only identify with the culture that you live in the soil that you were born, and that's what you are. So you're not going to delve into anything past that. Because we weren't taught our histories. We were taught Eurocentric religion, Eurocentric institutions, Eurocentric law. Like, this is what we've been indoctrinated into. So it means a lot of people don't know. And a lot of people have belief systems that's just something you don't want to know. It's something that's shameful. You just don't even want to attach yourself to it. So I never subscribed to that. I had a problem with that always. So people could say the ignorance around me is because I understand where it's coming from. But for me, I'm like, I want to know, and I'm going to know, and I'm going to keep that pathway of knowing. You could stay where you are. So where I am, where people are now, it's like, okay, that's great. I've seen the evolution that people now want to embrace this. You know, social media has helped us connect. But I've been in spaces where I felt it was so polarizing. Okay, I'm in the African community because I'm performing. But then I'm in this Caribbean community and you're over here. But there's no integration. That was the hardest thing. That was the hardest space to be in. Because I'm like, I'm part of both. Why don't people see the beauty in both? Why do I have to choose one? Because again, I'm from a multi-ethnic background. I'm not choosing. All of that's part of me. I'm only from X place. This is what I am. No. Where's your ancestry from? Do you even want to know? Do you want to investigate that? I'm sorry. So, yeah, that's been a whole trajectory for a very long time. And so for everybody that's now, okay, I don't look at it as is it fashion? Is it a fad? there's little stages of that. Okay, it's about let's get the clothes, the music. Let's exaggerate this because Wakanda, Then what? Are you engaging with the continent? Do you care about what's going on in the continent? Have you traveled to the continent to see? Have you interacted with people beyond your classrooms and workspaces? Like, what are you doing to engage with the continent? What are you doing to help advance it? So it's more than going to the movie and getting all excited. That's one form of like art. Art can excite us. That's great. But politically and socially and culturally, and what is your relationship? Like, that's my question for people. It can't be I'm Canadian. No, I'm just X. I'm just Y. No, we're part of a larger diaspora. Do you care to know what that is?
So here's something I wanted to bring up with you. And this is something that I've noticed even when I was capturing you at the performance that we were doing for Kevin's show. Mm-hmm. And when you were doing the Q&A and you were talking about as far as your background, you were very intentional in terms of identifying yourself as South American, mm-hmm. which you also did earlier in this interview as well. And again, knowing your family is of Guyanese descent, why is it important for you to make sure that South American is highlighted as a part of your heritage? Because again, giving context, in a lot of cases, when we're talking about like the Caribbean relations and stuff like that, the conversations that we have within our community about where Guyana usually stands within the Caribbean, the whole idea in terms of Guyanese is not really Caribbean, they're South American rather. Why did you make that intention to associate that South American side as a part of your identity and make that particularly known? Because that's not something that is a regular thing that I personally hear in a lot of cases.
That is very true, because we can associate ourselves with the Caribbean, but we're not an island. So we are connected to a continent that has a deep-rooted history, the transatlantic slave trade. When my father passed, and I learned from one of my siblings that, okay, so the village that daddy's family's from were like the first slaves to own their land after emancipation. Like, they owned the land. Because like even that alone, it's like, oh, you formed your own villages as Afro-descendant people after slavery ended. That's huge. Because you don't hear those stories, right? So it's like, okay, deep political histories in South America and a lot of racial history in South America. So again, when you think South America, you're not thinking who looks like me. You're thinking, Brazil, that lighter skin, like that whole racial history that people don't speak about. That, the lighter you are, the more, again, the colorism issues, the deep-rooted colorism issues. Looking at me, you wouldn't, and you see people in my family, you wouldn't think we're all related, because that's the cultural multi-ethnic makeup. So I think for me, we need to understand those lineages. We can't just be like, okay, I only know this level of generation of my family. No, it goes back. And I recently found out that my roots are in Cameroon.
Okay, how did you find that out? Please don't tell me it was an Ancestry.com. It was. Okay, please fill me in, because in a lot of those cases, there's been like that shakiness whenever you take those DNA tests and stuff like that. So guide me through this. I need to, this is a seeking to understand moment for me.
Well, and I did that because I'm like, okay, my father's side is dwindling. Father's gone. So I don't know patrilineal. So I'm like, let me try to figure out the matrilineal, at least. So I took the test. And that was a gift to myself, because I wanted to know. So it's 4 different ethnic clans. But it's central Africa, which is still part of the transatlantic slave trade. Yeah, so it's like, at least it gives me some answers. Okay, this is the region that your ancestors are from your matrilineal side. Okay, that gives me some information. And that gives me a sense of, as opposed to you just don't know. And it's not like when I would look at Henry Louis Gates Jr. show on PBS, Finding Your Roots. I watched that show, and I've watched it for years. And I've always thought it was interesting that whichever celebrity was on the show, at least they got a lot of answers, but they got it on American soil. They didn't get a lot of answers outside of that. But again, it's a team of people that's finding things out. Some of them found pictures. Some of them, so that intrigued me. I'm like, okay, what about my family? Because I don't have this. We don't have generations in Canada. I'm like first generation Canadian of immigrated parents from another continent. So how do you find that census to tie you to grandmother, grandfather? We don't have access to that. And I personally don't have the wherewithal to go to Guyana to figure that out, because I know it's going to be, finding this, it's like finding Waldo. It's not going to happen. So I would say it was just to tie up some unanswered questions, because I know it's the region. Like, you hear oral histories, what family members are telling you, but oral history can sometimes be wrong. I'm like, I just want to know. I don't want to spew oral histories that are incorrect. So I need to know. I know now. So it's a sense of exhaling. Okay, I know. Which means I can do some further research on these ethnic groups to figure out, what does that mean? What was their culture like? What is their language like? What are their dances like? That is a whole nother investigation that I could actually go on.
So I'm going to actually tie this into the work that you've developed under the Coco Collective, in terms of the prominent artists that you've been able to gather under the Coco Collective umbrella, and the way that yourself and the group has been able to mentor to youth in that respect, in terms of that particular history. How do you feel that the individuals that you've chosen to work with under the Coco Collective provide those opportunities for the students, the youth, to want to pursue and to actually hear those stories and get, excited about wanting to know more about their history, instead of what is just current and what is just at the base level, at the base census type level?
I can honestly say, when I curate people to join the collective or to work with the collective, I see and envision things that they're not understanding as yet. Meaning, yes, in terms of intergenerational artists, some may not see themselves as educators, but I put them in the position to be. Some already are. Wonderful work. So just give them another audience, another generation to work with. Those who are established. And then there's others that have never thought, but now after so many years of seeing where my thinking is, the programming I create, and then I give them, okay, this is the skeleton. Okay, see what you can add to this, and this is how we're going to deliver this. And then they go ahead and they do it. Then they kind of see oh, okay. But for other artists who educate differently, when they come and work with the collective, they see a different model. And again, it inspires them to also dig deeper, to say, okay, I need to really be conscious about what I'm actually teaching and be very intentional about what I'm teaching and why. I need to be researched. And Coco has asked me to do these things. So I actually have to think about this and come ready to present this. As opposed to, I'm not just come teach a workshop and leave. We're past that. So I'm on a pathway of, okay, what is it? Why are we doing it? What's the context around it? So it's getting people to think in different ways and how we present our art. We can't say we're teachers and we're not teaching anybody. Because to me, that's a disservice, not only to the art form, but to ourselves. And also to this Toronto landscape, because then we're not cultivating anybody to become the next generation of teachers. Because what did we teach them?
And I love that you actually brought this piece up, because it allows me to segue on the other side of it, because you're talking about the innovative arts educators that you've been able to amass under Coco Collective. But now let's talk about the client base that Coco Collective has as well, because a lot of the work that Coco Collective has done has been within the education sector. When you're talking about the Toronto District School Board, you could even think as far as, dare I say, like even in child welfare agencies that you've actually had interactions with and so on. Why was that? Even Google. Why was that the direction you chose to take the Coco Collective personalities, the Coco Collective influencers and educators, to say, this is where we need to make sure our message is heard, our message is known within these traditional institutional sections?
There you go. Exactly. Traditional institutions. What has institutions done to us? Because of the economy that we live in, institutions have been places that have excluded us. So I'm bringing educational in an alternative way into these institutions. So I'm intentional with that. Again, I'm not using a model of I'm just here to perform or I'm just here to teach a class and leave. To me, that's great. There's purposes for that. That's a lane that people can stay in. I'm choosing to really educate. I'm choosing for people to learn something, to walk away learning something that they never would have learned outside of the space, because I'm always in an artistic community and I'm learning and I'm growing. But even when I'm traveling, I'm learning and I'm growing. But if people had access to that all the time, then it will be part of your everyday. I'm going into institutions where I'm moving beyond the performance. We only come in just to perform. We're just a guest to perform. We're just a guest workshop. We're just an add-on. No, we are part of value-added learning. And we can do it in alternative ways. So I'm coming with, of course, different pedagogy. So that's why I move in the way that I'm moving.
Speaking of moving, this is the way that I'm going to segue into your own creative educational journey. The decision that you made in order to study under master teachers, under master choreographers, and the choice that you made to actually study in parts of Africa. That's not a path that is really taken by a lot of professional artists. I'm going to be the one that puts that out on Front Street from the outside.
Are you speaking about Canadians?
I will take that on and say, speaking about Canadians. I'll put that out there.
I receive that.
I want you to feel free to be as expressive as possible to talk about that experience and why that was so critical in terms of your creative growth.
I felt that it was important to make the trip, but because of my educational schedule, I never could go. So I always knew about that model, but it wasn't always us taking it. It was non-Black people taking it as part of this commercial space where master teachers are traveling, transnationally and teaching. So I decided, if we're really going to take this further, where I live is not the only place I can learn. It really wasn't. So I had to go outside of it and connect with people who were willing to work with me. There are very well invested drum and dance communities outside of Toronto. So when I was able to find them, it's like, okay, this is what I'm missing. If I had access to this, even all the years I've been going to Brooklyn, just didn't know where they were. I never knew. So once I found them, I'm like, okay, I would have been doing this sooner. So there's times I would just go by myself. I'm staying with fam, but I'm going to go dance. Even if I'm skipping meals, I'm just going there to feed myself the information. And then finally going to the continent, it didn't start with dance. It started through education. Arts came up once they got to know who I was while I was there. And then I ended up teaching dance over there in South Africa. Yeah, I would probably say filling in missing gaps as much as possible. Because, again, I can't only learn things from a narrow-minded window that people present it to me. I have to go deeper. I got to go further. I'm a curious person. I'm an ambitious person. So a book won't teach me. A performance won't be the only method of teaching me. I got to find people who's willing to actually teach me.
What was that process like in terms of introducing yourself to ex-master teacher that may not have actually known about you from beforehand? How was that actual process in terms of making the connection to say, hi, I'm Collette Murray. I want to be able to study under you. Like, what was that actual process like?
I would probably say after going to a number of classes under certain teachers, you just introduce yourself. They get to know who you are. And of course, at the time, there wasn't a lot of Toronto people coming anyway. So the people I was meeting got to know who I was, other dancers in the community. And then I got to know the teachers. And then I would just, ask questions. And they would tell me and we would connect. And then I found out about opportunities that they were teaching back home. And I would try to figure out, can I go to that actual trip? No, that doesn't work. Yeah, so once the South Africa trip happened, because that was a month, which is the longest I've ever been on the continent. Because again, people, I work. So you got to come back to your job. I couldn't do what I've seen other people do, which is like you actually just relocate and live there for 6 months or whatever, and then come back to where you live. Like I can't do that because that's not how my life is structured. So, there are people who intentionally study for longer. I wish I could do that. I wish I could. So I would say it was a whole process of people getting to know me and understanding my intentions that I truly wanted to learn. I truly wanted to study. And them getting to know me as, oh, Coco from Toronto. Yes. So yeah, that I would say that took years of fostering a relationship and trust and people getting to know me. And then I got to meet number of drummers as well as master teachers. So it's a process. It's a process. So it's not a fly by night. Okay, you came, you taught a class. I took a few classes from you. Now I'm a master teacher.
And we've seen that happen a few times.
No comment. As I sip my pineapple juice.
We're going to keep it PC up for this one. I appreciate it. We ain't calling no names, but again, we got to call things as they are.
Yeah.
That in a lot of cases, there are individuals that we've come across in which they take 1-2 dances and all of a sudden they see themselves as that master teacher. I want to actually talk about as far as why that actual mentality and that approach is dangerous in terms of preserving culture on that side of things. Like, why is that so dangerous?
It's dangerous and problematic in the sense that when you learn about how these families that have lineage pass on the art from one generation to the next generation, and it's families that are skilled artisans. And then you see this commercialized structure where some individuals, not all, are involved in this hustler mentality. I like this art form, but I don't really want to invest in it. But if I can get a few dollars here, a few dollars here, or present myself to get more dollars, I will simply do so. It's problematic because that is not how it's done. And for me, it's heartbreaking because I see what invested learning can become. Because when I travel and I see people who are part of these families of lineage, or when I see drum and dance communities and how people, even if they are starting to train 2, 3, 4 years, and this person is like 40 years, the exchange that happens in the skills that are developed, like top level, you would think that they were dancing for more than the 3 or 4 years they were dancing. So it becomes problematic because the learning stops. The people who are they're surrounded by the environment, they only learn so much, and then they think that's the standard when it's not. And sometimes you want a space that's affirming for blackness. That's great. But if you're not learning anything and it's just a whole poppy show, this is problematic, because there's some people who take this seriously. They invest, they're passionate, they have spent years training and learning. And then you're going to come and take the whole art form and make it become something and that's deconstructed into a hustle and a gig. That's very dangerous, because no one's learning anything. And then it's going to make all of us who are part of the art form subjected to people's assumptions that this is the value of that art form. We're going to treat it like this. No, it's but some people are not taking it seriously.
What would you say was one of the biggest things that you've learned on your journey as a dancer, as a choreographer, as the consummate student of the arts that you are? What would you say was one of the bigger takeaways that you've come across in your progressive journey?
You can't only learn from one person. You have to learn from multiple people in multiple spaces, and our globe is huge. So I'm not going to limit myself to just the city I live in to learn things when it's connected to a whole nother part of the globe. Take it as far as you can. And it's an ongoing process. Learning does not stop. I don't know what else to say.
Believe me, it can be just that.
It's just that.
It can be just that.
Yeah. Of course, I can bring in, of course, access and privilege. Okay, I've constructed and benefited from my privilege, but I've worked my butt off to have more privileges. So it's careful and strategic planning. It's getting the funds. It's finding the time to still invest in the learning. And to me, that amplifies the whole culture, as opposed to not amplifying it. I don't know. I'm just trying to be very careful in how I represent things. I also want to know things, and I don't know everything, and it's okay. And that's part of learning. You have to be teachable. You don't know everything. So you have to have a humility, and you got to have, of course, these are buzzwords, cultural competency, right? Because I'm also learning cultures that are not my own. Even if I'm a black person, learning from other continents of black people. These are cultures that are not my own. So I have to be humble in how I enter those spaces. And I still got to be respectful and responsible in how I handle those spaces. So I'm not an expert. I've never called myself that. I'm forever a student.
Now I'm going to give you a challenging question.
Okay.
As being a forever student in yourself, and given the fact that you've had over 20 years of experience in what it is that you truly love, in what it is that you truly give, when do you feel it would be time for you to accept the role, or accept the title rather, of an elder?
People already call me an elder. I still don't claim it.
Why?
Because, of course, that has to do with age. And to me, this is all timeless. I'm still a student. I'm still learning. And I think that ambition and drive to still keep learning, that's what keeps me young. Even if my age is getting higher and higher and higher, that's fine. I don't look it. You laughing over there.
You have to call that out. Listen, I know this to be true.
Hey.
I know this to be true. as she sips on her pineapple juice once again. This happens way too many times when we're together. Way too many times.
Yeah, this whole ageism piece. And even people I call elders, I remember once they even said to me, you know what, now we're elders. Like they just had this moment of receiving that I called them elders. They didn't see themselves that way. But I say I respect you as my elder. So they didn't take it as, age. Like they have wisdom and they have experience and they have lived experiences to share with me. I do the same, even if someone is 5 years younger than me or 15 years younger than me. But at the same time, I think the reason why I also don't claim this title of elder is because I don't mind working with people younger than me. Hence why I've been on a couple of AC's projects. The oldest person on the cast, quote unquote. I can learn from younger people too. I have that humility as well. Because it's not about, well, I'm older, I know it all. That's arrogance. I can learn from people older than me. I can learn from my peers. I can learn from people younger than me. I can learn anywhere. So people will have to call me elder, and that's them calling me elder. I don't call myself the elder.
I mean, I'm going to make the attempt of wrapping this up, but you already know how we stay. There's never a time in which when we say it's a wrap up, it typically turns into like a typical family thing where we'll be still talking for hours and hours, and there'll be some like nugget that'll come into effect. That's just a regular thing.
Yes, indeed. I'm agreeing.
The amount of tea and reasoning sessions that we've had that I appreciate so much, knowing as far as how much you've actually motivated and inspired me, but at the same time offered space for me to support you creatively, professionally, and personally. That's huge. Just to say the least. That's
reciprocity. That's what friendship's supposed to be. Oh, because I have these awards, then you are on another level. No, you are my peer. We can exchange. You have perspectives that I don't know. I have some you don't know. We can engage and we can exchange. Because we're learning from each other. Reciprocity.
What would you like for people to take away from seeing you, Miss Coco, in full performance mode?
I would like for them, moving beyond enjoyment, I would say feeling, I guess maybe witnessing someone who's passionate and who cares about the art that they represent. I hope that they would feel that they are part of the performance, giving a window to an art form that they may not see all the time. You can see drum and dance, and you can have your assumptions about it, but I would like to show them as much of the diversity of that as possible. Walk away learning something beyond just consuming and, oh, I like this, I appreciate it, clap and leave. Like, I would like them to at least learn something from me, saying, okay, there's something more I can learn here, or maybe I'm interested and I'm curious and I want to know more. Hopefully it sparks curiosity to learn more.
What do you feel that young Coco would feel seeing Miss Coco at her place in life right now?
Little Coco was quiet and shy. Just, yeah, this is the complete opposite. She's bold. She has a tenacity about her. She don't play. She's hardworking, takes no crap, and continues to surprise maybe even her own self on how much she could do. Yeah, that's what little Coco would see. The sky's the limit. Don't let anybody tell you it's not.
You can find out more about Collette Miss Coco Murray at www.misscocomurray.com, and learn more about Coco Collective at www.misscocomurray.com/Coco Collective. Do You See Us has been produced, mixed, and edited by me, S-Quire Johnson. Theme music and original music in this episode provided by Daniel D. Styles Page. Episodes can be found on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/CUSPod and wherever you find your favorite podcasts. For more information on this and other episodes, email us at cuspod@gmail.com and check us out on Instagram at cuspod. This has been an S-Quire Media production.